Annie, I think you're sharing your screen right now. I didn't know if you meant to before we get started. Okay, I see. Are we
Just
good now?
practice to make sure I could do it.
Okay. All right. Well, this is our last installment of this fall's Hunger Summit. We want to thank everyone for joining us today, and those of you that have been here from the beginning, thank you for your continued support. If you haven't been here before, my name is Terrence Hunter. I'm the Delta Fellow for the Delta Directions Consortium, and again, I just want to thank you all for coming. Like I said, this is our last summit. We've had three before now. The first one that focused on the Feed Fund interviews, which was very informative for everyone, including myself. The second summit, which was we had a chance to speak with the USDA representative, and she gave us some good information on their food box initiative. And our last summit, which happened in November, where we had our Harvard Law School partners with the Food Law and Policy Clinic come and do a presentation on food insecurity and food policy in Mississippi. And today we are having Dr. Annie Kafer do a presentation on the Mississippi Health and Hunger Atlas. If you don't know Dr. Annie Kafer, she is a assistant professor at the University of Mississippi, and she's also the coordinator for the University of Mississippi Community First and Research Center for Wellbeing and Creative Achievement. The short way to say it is UM-CREW. That's the best way I can say it. And she's going to give us a good explanation of what she's been working on over the, I think maybe 2 years now, coming up on it. And that's going to be, so please pay close attention. There's going to be some very good information. A few housekeeping things I want to discuss before we get started. As while the presentation is going on, please everyone keep your mics on mute. I know sometimes we forget, but it can be a bit distracting for the presenter. So just make sure all your mics are on mute. The second thing is we want to let you know that this session is being recorded. And if you don't want to be recorded, you do have the option to exit the discussion. We hope you don't, but the reason why we're recording it is because we want to make it available for you at a later date. So that's another thing we wanted to let you know. And after Dr. Kafer's presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session. So while she's presenting, please make sure you write down your questions. You can even put them in the chat, in the Zoom chat. And once she finishes her presentation, we will go through each question. So if you want to write them down on your own piece of paper or in the chat, please feel free to do so. And after that Q&A session, we're also going to have a polling session. I know we had one during the first Hunger Summit where we asked you a few questions to try to get information from you so we can understand how to best serve your needs. So be aware of that. After the Q&A session, we're going to have a polling session. We want your responses. And after the polling session, we're going to give you updates on the CARES Act funding, the grant application. So we're going to have some updates on that. And lastly, as we've done for the past 2 Hunger Summits, we're going to give another random participant $250 door prize. The Maddox Foundation is providing this door prize, so please, we will announce that at the end of the summit. So make sure you stick around for the end. So I think that's all I need to say going forward. I think now I can hand it over to you, Dr. Kafer.
Thank you, Terrence. And I first just want to thank everyone for coming. I know that this is sort of a chaotic time of year and a very chaotic 2020. So I appreciate you all taking the time to be here and hear what we're doing at the center and at UM-CREW in terms of hopefully making data a little bit more accessible to communities. So I want to give a little bit of a background about what I do at the university. So as Terrence mentioned, I'm an assistant professor. I co-direct with my colleague Megan Rosenthal UM-CREW, which is basically it's a center that's designed to put communities in the driver's seat of research that happens in their community. We often conceptualize it around community development, but our goal in doing this is to level the playing field so that when communities want to reach out to universities or researchers, that they're in a more equal partnership because they have a better understanding of the research process, that they've, through our center developed their own research questions, and they know what kind of expertise they need and they want, and so that they can have more power in that relationship. So if you know of anyone or know of groups that need that kind of assistance, let me know. I'm also an affiliate faculty of the Center for Population Studies, which is actually where this work comes out of. The Mississippi Health and Hunger Atlas is actually an outgrowth of work that I did as a PhD candidate at Mizzou. We published the Mississippi Hunger Atlas, which its focus was on food insecurity, hunger, and how counties in Missouri were addressing need. And it was, Mizzou it's a land grant. So this was a tool that was really conceptualized around extension and helping extension practitioners access data that can be, as we'll talk about later, can be a little bit of a headache, either to navigate websites to find it, or in some cases is just not accessible. And what this does is it assesses need in a county, and it also assesses performance, right? So we'll look at a range of indicators that are designed to assess levels of hunger or levels of health inequality or poor health. But then it also will look at what are counties doing, or how are they doing in particular measures of performance. So are they getting folks enrolled in programs that are helpful? Do they have a lot of active food hubs or food organizations that are helping folks access food? And we really envision this in Mississippi as a tool for extension, for policymakers, for community members or community organizations who are grant writing, right? Who are going to be the ones who are doing the programming and trying to secure funds to address these issues and improve performance in the county. But the time it takes to do that kind of programming and do the grant writing, we wanted to make at least this step of that process a little bit easier. So in Mississippi, what we've done is we've included both health and hunger indicators. So it's not just food security or SNAP, but we're also looking at things like healthcare providers, inequalities. We're looking at food systems as a whole. One of the really important parts of this being a state level assessment, because I imagine some of you, if not all of you, are familiar with USDA, I think, in the Census Bureau will often show regions, right? They'll look at counties in the entire US, and then they'll rank them in like quartiles, right? So they'll tell you, highest need to lowest need, but they're doing that. In a sense, they're ranking those counties against all other counties in the US. Mississippi State has a really great tool that they use that inputs data from those places. The problem, though, is that that's a really great tool if you want to talk about state level programs and you want to talk about the need at the state level. But if you want to compare regions within Mississippi, one of the problems that happens is that Mississippi ends up being in the bottom, and most, if not all, counties end up being in those bottom quartiles. So it's really hard to look at differences by regions in Mississippi, right? So how does the Delta compare to the coast, compare to the hills, right? So, and there are differences, and those are important. And they help us tailor programming if we can understand the differences in regions. And we can provide better, more accurate recommendations to policymakers or to programmers in those places if we can understand differences within our own state. So importantly, what the Mississippi Health and Hunger Atlas does is it takes this national data, and rather than indexing it to all counties in the US, it only indexes it to Mississippi counties. So we're only comparing, say, Quitman County to all other Mississippi counties, or Lafayette County to all other counties in Mississippi. We're not going to be comparing Quitman County to all other US counties, because that's not really a fair comparison. One of the other things to come out of the Health and Hunger Atlas is a suite of briefs. So when we initially put out the atlas, we also, it was around the same time that they were condensing the public health districts. So we did a number of briefs around what the potential consequences of condensing those public health districts would be. And you can access those on CPS's website. And we found some really interesting patterns that I'll talk about later in the presentation. Because what we also do is we map out these indicators, and we do some additional sort of high level analysis that makes some of these patterns pop out, and tells a very different story in Mississippi than I think people are used to hearing. So that's actually, for me, one of the most exciting things about this particular work. So this is the cover. I'm apologize ahead of time. We had hoped to have the new atlas completely ready to go at this point in the year. That did not happen, and I will explain to you specifically why that did not happen. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm going to show you today, it's the same material. We're just going to update the numbers for you. So it'll all be updated with either 2018 or 2019 data. So whatever's the most recent. There's always a lag with data. So we just input the most recent, and then we tell you where we get the data from and then and what year it is. So this is all information from the 2017 atlas. So one of the things that we do in the atlas is we provide some background, because we understand that not some people are going to use this and they're only going to care about their county. Totally cool. Go to your county page, figure out what data you need, download it. Awesome. But the other thing we like to do is sort of contextualize the entire state compared to other national trends. So we provide a background, we map out some of the food insecurity levels in Mississippi to national levels, and then we talk through what was the actual purpose of the atlas. So the front end of the atlas has a lot of this background information of why we do this, what's in it, and what are some high level trends that we see. We also detail out the methodological process, in part because as researchers, those things are really important to us, but we also believe in transparency of data. So we want you to have a full and complete understanding of where we get the data from and how we're comparing counties. And so we have a number of different variables, and then we use those variables to create a need indicator, right? It's an index, and a performance indicator or an index. And we weight those variables, and it's all done by ranking counties from high to low, and then we put them in their quartiles. And you can see here, right, very high in the 80th and 100th percentile, very low is at the bottom. And then we explain for each indicator what that means specifically, right? So if you're very low in terms of food insecurity, that means you're very food insecure. Because sometimes, and my graduate assistant would often come back and talk through, because sometimes it's confusing the way that we rank the variable than how we talk about it. So we try to, and in the updated version, we will clarify that more clearly. So these are some examples of the output, right? So these are the pages before you get to the county page. This is all at the front. And what we do is we show you, this is for context, right? So we want you to understand where counties rank, again, only against other Mississippi counties. So this isn't compared to the nation, it's only compared to other Mississippi counties, where folks rank in terms of poverty. We also look at percent of families in poverty, median family income. We have a number of economic variables that help provide some of that social context to the health and hunger variables. And then we map out some of them. And this is one of those things that if you needed a map that isn't provided in the atlas, we're happy to do that for you. I realize I just volunteered Jamiko for extra work, but if you need it, you let us know and we will get it to you. And then these are some examples of the need indicators. So this is data that we pull from Feeding America, they have a Map the Meal Gap. So we pull that data and map out the percentage of children in a county that are food insecure, and then percentage of the general population that's food insecure. So as you can see, the delta here ranks very high, which means that they have a larger percentage of their population that's food insecure compared to, say, the coastal region or the Northeast. Okay. And we try to make the colors intuitive. If you have recommendations, we're happy to take that. So then we give you the ranking, but then we also tell you exactly where we get the data. So Feeding America, Map the Meal Gap, we tell you the dates that that data is collected so that you know that you have the most up to date, or you can at least talk about, you know, in such and such year, Quitman County ranked 62 out of 82. That's not, don't use those numbers. And then it sort of tells you where they extrapolated that data. And then it tells you a range, right? So this is really important because we're mapping this 1 to 82, but the real range, right? So the county with the least amount of food insecurity still has a food insecurity rate among children of almost 20%. Okay, so that tells you the range. The counties with the worst levels of food insecurity for children is nearly 40%. So we try to make sure that you have all of the data, and you all can thank John Green because he's always getting on to me about how much data I've included in my map. But then one of the other things, because I think we all hear the need, we always talk about need and everything's bad and it's getting worse, but as applied researchers, it's really important to us to also talk about what is going well, what's happening that's going well in counties, what are counties doing that are meeting this need, because we recognize, as many of you do, I'm sure, because you work in these communities, you all are doing really important and really meaningful and really helpful work to folks who need it most. And so we wanted to respect that and recognize that in the Atlas. And so we have a number of performance indicators. And we made them blue because it's a calming color, and we just barrage you with a lot of red, which is a very alarming color. There's a lot of psychology behind colors. I don't get it, but that's okay. So here's an example of what those performance indicators are. So one is the Local Sustainability Resilience Index. If you have questions about this index, I'm going to point you to John Green because this index is his baby. And there's some great math and some great theoretical underpinnings to this that I'm not going to go into detail about. But still, knowing that it's something that's calculated by John Green and a number of his colleagues, we still tell you where we get the numbers. And then this one, because it's an index and there's not really percentages associated with it, that you don't have a range. But again, all of the information that you need to source the data is here. Okay, so this is where, as researchers, we get a little nerdy and we get really excited. And this for me is probably, these are the two most powerful, and the one on the right of your screen is probably for me the most powerful map that we have done in the Atlas. So what we did in these two maps, the first one is in the red, it's folks who had low performance, and we based it on their level of need. Okay, so here you can see dark red. So we only took counties that had low performance. Okay, so when we ranked them on that performance indicator, and only those that were in the bottom, okay, that were performing the least well. We mapped those out, and then we based it on, okay, well, if you have low performance but you have low need, okay, that's fine. That's a equal match, right? But what's interesting to us are the counties, and if you from these counties, I'm sorry, and if you have suggestions for maybe something we've missed, we're all ears. But what you notice is that you have a number of counties that have really high need, these dark red ones here, but aren't performing super well, right? Which means that for the things that we've measured in terms of performance, folks that need those services or maybe need to be enrolled in those programs aren't getting enrolled, or aren't getting assistance, or aren't getting help of some kind. And there could be lots of other things that are going on that we're not accounting for, but in terms of the secondary data that we have access to, this is how it shakes out for low performance counties. However, for me, this blue map is really powerful because what this tells me, and many of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the rhetoric around the Delta, right? It's poor, it's always going to be poor, it's always going to be hungry, it's never going to develop. You're wasting your money, you're wasting your time. I know that as an outsider who is very unfamiliar with Mississippi geography, that's what I got told a lot. But I think it's really powerful to look at this map and see that counties with some of the highest need, but the highest performance are in the Delta. Okay, so that changes the narrative. That becomes much more powerful to me. And that helps us tell a story that's not like this lost cause. And I think one of the really powerful things about using secondary data, and again, not just concentrating on how the state compares to the rest of the nation, but how are we doing in our own state compared to each other? This is an example of a county page. And here you'll notice there's a couple of highlighted bars. This is where our bottleneck in terms of data has sort of reached a head, in part because we no longer have access to some of the Medicaid data. So a lot of the Medicaid data is protected for incredibly important reasons. We don't want to violate someone's privacy. And so we've had some difficulties getting access to these numbers. And likely what we're going to have to do is simply remove some of these Medicaid numbers. If we can't find them somewhere else. We can't get them from the state Medicaid office. The other thing that we're having some issues with is SNAP enrollment. And in part because of the way we measure children versus the way that the state measures children. And so this is just one of those things that transparency and data, the state measures children as anyone under the age of 20. We measure children as anyone under the age of 18. So the data we can get is not exactly the data that we used previously, because we received it when we did the 2017 Atlas in different increments. So that's simply, we'll use the under 20 measure and we'll make a note of that so that people are aware that it's not measuring 18 and younger, it is in fact measuring 20 and younger. And then that leads into some of the issues around children who are income eligible, because the census measures, we extrapolate this number as 18 and younger. So what's going to happen is if we use the 20 and under measure here, it's going to inflate everyone's percentages because we'll be counting the 18 to 20 group when we know that income wise, we're only counting 18 and under. And so that's something that we have to reconcile before we get this published. We have the rest of this data. It's ready to go. It's updated. We're just waiting on these bits of information and how to reconcile those before we move on. So next steps, the updated Atlas, January 1, I'm going to die trying, so that it's out there and you all have that, especially given that this is going to be a time for writing lots of grants and proposals and demonstrating need in a time where we need it. We will do some additional analytics. We would like to do multi-year analysis on how things change in place over time. That takes a couple of iterations of the Atlas. And then we'll continue to do policy briefs out of this data. In part, we want to use this data to speak to relevant policy issues. So if you all have recommendations or you have things you'd like to see us do at the center, we're absolutely open to those recommendations. And with that, I'm going to close for Q&A because I know that there's lots of other things to do in this session.
Thank you so much, Dr. K, for that. Was very enlightening. Before we go into the Q&A, I wanted to start off with an initial question. How can the participants find this information? Where can they find the Atlas? I see John dropped the link earlier in the chat, but where can they find this once it's completed?
So we're gonna house it in the same place. Let me, with my 35 windows that are open right now. I have to do this every time. I just type in Mississippi Health and Hunger Atlas into Google. If I can spell correctly. And it's just, let me do a screen share really quick. There we go. Yes, it did it. There we go. So I just typed to Google because I can't remember the thing. But it's housed on the Center for Population Studies website within Atlas. So if you were just to go to the homepage, that's not in population briefs. Scroll down. John, you may have to help me. Is it in APCRL? Because it's not in population briefs. Programs, maybe? With all of the adjusting we've done to the website.
I just posted the link back in chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so Annie, if you go to programs
Yeah.
and then go down to Society and Health Research Initiatives. Sorry, guys. I know it's a long.
Okay. And then it's there. Maybe we should put like.
We can make that bigger.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I've never had any issues when I just Google it though.
Okay, well, we'll try to make sure everyone can just access it. See, John did repost it in the chat. And once it's finished, we'll try to make sure we can give directions on how to access it through the Center for Population website.
And we'll leave both editions up, right? So you'll have 2017 and the new one so that you may not be interested in everyone's change over time, but you could at least look at your community, your county over time, if that's of interest to you.
Annie, can you pull up a county page?
Yep.
So that people can
Sure
see
can.
what they're talking about?
Do you want me to, I had one in the PowerPoint. You want me to pull that one up?
Sure. Just to emphasize it again.
Yeah. Ooh, stop. Man, I'm going to be ready for Zoom to not be a thing in my life. Okay, here we go. Okay, so these are what all the county pages look like. They'll have your county right there in the left, and they're all in alpha order. And then they'll show you what your overall performance versus your overall need. For those of us who are geographically challenged, on lots of occasions, we include a figure to let you know where it's located. But if it's your community, I'm sure you don't need that. I do.
Okay. And I know John answered the question in the chat, but Tom Pittman had a question for you, Annie.
Yes.
Do we know why such a larger percentage of children are food insecure in comparison to adults who are food insecure? And John touched on it, but I don't know if you want to add something to it.
Well, part of it becomes you're dividing income over multiple folks versus a single member household or a two-person household. So part of it's about how income gets divided. And then you have, the literature supports lots of things around, like if you are managing childcare, you may not be able to work particular types of hours. So you're doing part-time work or you're piecemealing jobs. So it's a law of averages in the sense that if two folks are working, even if they're working part-time and they're dividing that income over just two adults, that's different than two adults and a child or two adults and two children.
Okay. And Dr. Kafer, I don't know if you're still trying to show something on the PowerPoint.
No, no,
Yeah.
there we go.
I know sometimes, I know with me, when I'm listening to someone, it's easy for me to comprehend when I see
Yes.
that face.
Yes.
Okay. All right, now we're in the Q&A session. Any other questions that people have not dropped in the chat that they've written down on their own pieces of paper? Feel free to unmute yourselves and pose any questions you might have.
Or suggestions, we'll take those too.
In the interim, I know I could go with the question. In your view, what is the best way the food banks can use this atlas in their own practice?
So I think the way I've seen it used in Missouri, for example, has really been around advocacy or communicating to donors the need. And increasingly, donors are also wanting to see, okay, you're trying to meet a need, but is there anyone else meeting that need? And this provides a tool to say, well, we're it, right? Like in terms of performance, in terms of meeting these needs, these are places that maybe as a county we're falling short, or maybe we're doing well on, and we're gonna meet this other particular niche. So I think in Missouri, it was often used to help a donor understand the landscape and where either extension agents and nonprofits who are working in communities sort of fit within that landscape. So, and because it comes from a university and there's researchers attached to it, it's not just someone saying it, right? Like that carries weight, as unfortunate as that is. And that, I think that gives donors some sense of security.
Absolutely. So everyone, listen, use this to advocate for help. If your county needs help, use this research. It will be available. It's going to be updated over time, and this is what it's here for.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone in the chat? I know I can shoot off another question if I need to, but we're here for you all.
And I will say I've worked, so I keep referencing Quitman County because that's my frame of reference. That's the community that I've worked in since I've been here. That they've used this data, for example, to apply for a grant to get the new grocery store. And so it's helpful in terms of that landscape and helping them understand, the food landscape. But we're also one of those, like, if you see your county page and you're like, you know what, there's something that would be super helpful that you all have clearly missed, point that out to me. If I can find a secondary data source that I can pull and incorporate, I'm completely open to that.
Absolutely.
Or if you need a map, shout out to Jamiko.
I do have a question that I'm really interested in, because I saw my county, Adams County. I'm from Natchez, Mississippi, and I saw it was either in the low performance high need range, or it was in the high performance high need range. It was in one of them, and both are very alarming to me. What are the factors that go into either scenario?
Right. So Adams County is in high performance, high need. And so what we do is we take, and I'll pull it up again in the event that it's useful. Because I think where'd my PowerPoint go? Just kidding. In the Atlas, it shows you which of the variables, right? So we have a range of food insecurity variables, a range of health variables, and we use some, not all of them, but we use a big chunk of them, in part because some things are double counting intent. But we use some of them to calculate a need variable, and then we use the performance, right? So like how many folks are enrolled in SNAP? How many folks are enrolled in Medicaid? How many folks, how resilient is their food system? And we incorporate those into the performance, right? So the idea of high need is that you'd have, likely high poverty. You have a relatively high percentage of your population that's food insecure. You likely have a high percentage of children who are food insecure. You likely don't have enough primary care providers or critical access hospitals. That would put you in a high need category. Whereas high performing would be like, sure, we have a lot of folks who are low income and food insecure, but we enroll a big chunk of them in SNAP. We enroll a big chunk of them in, we didn't use WIC in this one, but most of the folks who need it are enrolled in Medicaid. We have a resilient food system. I think the food sustainability index, John, I butchered it. I know, I'm sorry. You'll see that it's really robust on the coast. They've done a really good job of building resilient food systems there. And so they may not perform as well on some of the other performance indicators, but because they have really robust food systems, they do okay. And so it's that negotiation, right? And what we have found in the Atlas is that folks do either really well in enrolling folks in programs and getting people the assistance they need at state and federal level, or they tend to do really well in terms of the intangibles, right? Like a good food system or a good healthcare system. Did that answer your question? I feel like I just rambled.
Yeah, absolutely. It did. Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. I'm not seeing any more questions. I see one from Angela. Please forgive me if I say her last name wrong. You can correct me, take it off mute and correct me if you need to. But Angela Howell, she's asking, do you have any current information on Forest and Lamar County? I think that's around the Hattiesburg area.
Yes. So we, if you click on the link that John uploaded, you'll have the 2017 Atlas is there. January 1, I swear to you, whatever state it's in, it will be up, but it will have those counties as well. It'll have all 82 counties.
Okay.
And thankfully, unlike Missouri, who has like St. Louis City as its own entity, we don't have that in Mississippi, so it doesn't get wonky.
Okay. Well, from what I'm seeing in the chat, and from what I'm not hearing from the participants, it seems like they're just amazed by the research, and it's very helpful. I'm sure we've seen that they've used it in the past, and I'm sure it's going to be like that in the future. Thank you, Dr. Kafer, for coming and doing this presentation. We'll be sure to keep on everyone updated. Tom, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, Terrence, I'm sorry to be slow with asking my question, but I was in talking about performance measurements, Annie, it looked like that was all governmental kind of performance, and it does not include performance of nonprofits. And I assume that's because, one, am I right? And so I assume that's because that's the data you have available. Is that right? Yes,
so that is absolutely correct. The only correction I might make to that is that John's index incorporates things that aren't necessarily governmental. The government measures them, but it's not necessarily a government initiative. And this is one of the struggles, and where I always am like very nervous about presenting this to communities, is that I know that there's lots of great nonprofit work that's happening in these communities, but there's not a clearinghouse of data that's easily incorporated into this. And maybe that's like the next thing that we work on at the center. But take all of this with the caveat that it doesn't incorporate a lot of the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, if I could jump in to add to that, Annie.
Yeah.
So on the food resilience index, as you mentioned, we account for things like farmers markets, farm to school programs, kind of local initiatives by farmers and so forth. But that has been captured in those data sources. I think as Annie mentioned, other types of work, including the work, for example, of food banks, is not captured in that. One of the ideas that we've discussed is, instead of incorporating that within the index that Annie's already created, is to kind of have whether or not there are food pantries and other types of assistance like that kind of separately, so that we can see how they relate to these other need and performance indicators. And so we've done some investigation of that. And just one of the challenges is that the data aren't standardized across all of the 82 counties. So kind of figuring out what's the best way to have those estimates. But that's one of the ideas that we have for the future.
Okay. Brenda, did you have something? I thought I saw a hand go up on your screen.
Yes, I just wanted to say on behalf of the nonprofits in Northwest Mississippi, we've been working closely with y'all, but we are very interested in how we can help to provide information from the terrific food pantries, nonprofits, etc. If there's a way that we can help you to collect that information to, make that information in a format that is usable, we're more than willing to help do that because we think that's very important to validate what's happening.
Yes. No, that would be great. And maybe it's worth a brainstorming session of folks here about what is that data, and how do we sort of routinely collect it? Because I think that's within the purview of, I'm gonna speak for the center, even though I'm not the director. That collecting that data is within the purview of what we do and in the interest of getting stakeholders access to data. But even if we had a standardized way of collecting it, that's different than nothing at all, right?
All right. Well, again, thank you, Dr. K, for giving this information.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Deborah Coleman, we are going, like I said in the beginning, we're recording this session. I see you asked how can we get a copy of this webinar. We're recording it. We're going to make it available to you all at a later date once we can get everything finalized and get it suppressed into a way to maybe on YouTube. I think we can put it on the Center for Population Studies YouTube page and also the Community Foundation's web YouTube page, but we will make it available at a later date. Just a reminder, we are going to, we're going to have this polling session that John Green is going to administer at this time. But just be reminded that after the polling session, we are going to give a quick Keith that we see he's joined us now. He's going to give an update on the CARES Act funding, and at the end, we're also going to announce the door prize winner for the $250 grant. So please stay tuned. John, I will turn it over to you for the polling guide session.
All right, thank you. So as Terrence mentioned, when we did the first Hunger Summit, we had posed some polling questions just to help get information to the Community Foundation and to our Delta Directions Consortium Collaborative to help us identify what are the different needs and challenges, et cetera, that your organizations are facing, help to inform the Feed Fund Initiative, et cetera. Now with, we see the continuation of need, we see continuing challenges with the pandemic. We wanted to check in on some of those questions again. And so Lynn's going to pose those. This time, just for the kind of sake of time and for clarity, instead of doing them one at a time, you'll receive kind of all the questions together in one poll. They just take a couple of minutes to answer, but you'll have to scroll down to continue to answer those. We're going to give you a couple minutes. For those of you organizations with food pantries and nonprofits providing direct services, if you could just scroll through and answer these questions, it'll be really, really helpful to the Feed Fund Initiative.
Yeah. So I just launched the, you should see it up right now, and there's 6 questions. So if you wouldn't mind answering those, and we just like to see more of what's happening in your location. So.
I'll say while folks are wrapping up, we'll give it another minute. I'll just mention before we close to look at the results, to connect to our previous conversation about some of the initiatives that your organizations and others in the community are doing. Our intention through the center is to do a follow-up survey with organizations for more of this information, so that the next time, hopefully, we can reconvene going into the new year to share that information, and hopefully, just based on today's conversation, it could serve as a way to inform having data about those services that's being provided through the nonprofit. So we'll continue to share that information. With that, we've closed the poll. We'll I don't know. Can folks see the poll results? Okay. And we'll we have that information. We can share this with you if it's useful to you to be able to say in your communication with your organization, with donors, et cetera, what are the needs that you're hearing from other organizations, that hopefully this information will be useful. I know it's certainly will be useful to us through the consortium and with the Community Foundation to be able to continue to try to help with these initiatives. And Keith is asking how many people responded. I think it was 21 is what I think. Okay, with that, we'll turn it back to you, Terrence. I know we have some updates.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next thing. Keith, we have Keith Fulcher here with us. He's going to give you all an update on the CARES Act grant application.
All right, well, let me first ask if Connie James is online. Did it work out today, Connie?
It did. It worked fine.
Great, thank
yeah,
you.
as a matter of fact, they've already delivered the truck and we're getting it out right now.
Okay, I know I'm putting you on the spot and you're gonna not like me for it, but do you want to just share with everybody the opportunity that came your way? We brokered today. So we're just connecting people who care with causes that matter. That's all we do. Connect people who care with causes that matter. Connie, do you mind?
I don't mind. I don't mind.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I hate the Zoom thing, so I'm not gonna. Right. Pam with Mississippi Crisis. Keith was able to put me in touch with her. She had a whole truckload of food that she wanted to deliver and give out, and we have about 6 ministries here today to pick it up. So right now, I went outside just before the meeting started and checked to make sure everybody was having lunch, and they were yelling at me, nobody's got time for lunch today. You know, so we didn't, they didn't stop for lunch. They're still loading as we speak. Again, the new forklift is, as soon as we get that in, that's going to really, really help us get the food into the other agencies faster and better. And in the rain, that would really be helpful because we're using just one forklift with a cardboard roof on it to unload our trucks and to get it into other pantries and other agencies. But we're so grateful, Keith, for you and for Community Foundation. We're so grateful. Not enough words.
Well, thank you, Connie. I mean, as I say frequently, we've got the easy job. We're just raising the money. Everybody on this call is doing the hard work. I see Shalisa Presley on the call. I've got video of her in a thunderstorm blowing away the tent. And she's still going up to the cars saying, how many diapers do you need? How much money, how much food do you need? And your son too, and daughter, I believe. So y'all are doing the hard work. We're just trying to raise the money.
Trying to find a heater. I mean, just so we can stand outside without freezing to death, but that didn't help us today. A heater wouldn't have even helped today.
Yeah. So on the feed fund, we've raised $730,000, and the Maddox Foundation just last week pledged another $150,000 in a matching gift. So once that is matched, we're going to top $1 million in direct and indirect grants, primarily to you as food pantry. So if there are any needs that you have, please don't hesitate to call, send an email, text if it's dealing with children, nutrition, health, academics. And you all need to give a clap. I think there's a way to clap on here to Tom Pittman, who founded the Community Foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tom, thank you for everything you started.
Thank you.
So that's an update on the feed. I mean, and John, Lynn, Terrence, this Delta Directions, we couldn't be doing these events and the level of sophistication without you. I was really pleased to see that one of the questions said equipment and transportation, because that's another area that we're trying to move in to get more food here into our communities. And I think Langston is on the call today with Society of St. Andrews, and he called me the other day about an opportunity for yogurt. So we like getting the calls, and then we just make recommendations of who's out there that can distribute the food. So thank you. So on the CARES Act, we have 1.2 million a grant. To date, we have approved 180,000 in grants. 180,000 of the 1.2 million, we have approved 180,000. There are zero nonprofits left to approve. So we have approved everyone who has submitted and is eligible. Does that make sense? Everyone who's submitted and is eligible, we have no more to consider. I stay up to 11 o'clock each night going through to get these knocked out. We're going to write checks today for the CARES Act. There are about 70, and I see some of them on the call. I know Donald Green's on the call, 70 who have created an application but not fully submitted. So you have plenty of time to submit. Maybe since we last visited, the newest opportunity to be reimbursed from the CARES Act is loss of income from fundraising events or donations. I don't know if we've talked about that before, but that was approved. So there was a volunteer fire department in Eudora. They had a $9,000 fundraising events by working concession stands. Well, there are no more concession stands at these ball fields since March 1. So they've lost about $9,000. They can simply send us their upload on the grants portal, a bank statement or any evidence showing last year, 9,000 due to COVID. Here's a screenshot of a social media post saying due to COVID, no concession stands, zero income. Then they can be reimbursed up to $9,000. Terrence, does that make sense? That's just a quick explanation, but it all needs to be documented. 2019 comparison to income to 2020. That's the easiest way, in my opinion, to get a reimbursement. So overall, statewide, about $800,000 has been approved from 7 community foundations. So you can see in proportion, we've already approved 180, total about 800,000. So I feel pretty good about what we've done so far to date, but we've still got we got about 1 million left to give away. So just stay in touch. I got 3 calls today, and I got 4 yesterday. Stacy Trout sent out a news release to all area newspapers and social media with a Q&A ask with scenarios about the CARES Act. And so we're getting calls, which we'd like, but it's overwhelming to us. But that's what we're here to do, is to serve our nonprofits. Terrence, is that a good enough overview?
Yeah,
This is great.
if we want to open it, we have any questions for Keith before we close it out? I think that was some good information. Brenda, did you have something?
I just wanted to remind the nonprofits that I think this is right, Keith. You have till December 15th to start your application. And then you
Yes.
have till January 15th to complete collecting all of your documentation. So please go ahead and at least start your application at cfnm.org. It's on our front webpage. And just at least go ahead and start it, and then you will be ready when you collect all your information.
And Terrence, I just text you, Terrence, I got an email from MS Foundation, Women's Foundation out of New York. They have $1 million to give away. Women of color is their nonprofits led by women of color. So I just sent that information to Brenda, to you, Kara, Terrence, John, Lynn, and if that we can get that information out to our nonprofits, please apply for that also. So any opportunities we get, we receive, we're going to push it out to you in case you do qualify.
And one last question I might have, is there a hard deadline for everything to be submitted? Is that the January 15th date, or is there a day after that where everything has to be completed?
Yeah, Stacy, are you online? Stacy, give them, I'm not looking at that hard deadline. Stacy, if you have it in front of you.
Yes, the hard deadline is January 15th to get everything into your application. If you aren't quite sure, I do suggest you all at least just register by December 15th. That if you register, you don't have to apply if you decide you don't want to, but at least you'll be in there to apply and finish your application by December 15th. And you'll have that 1 month leeway to submit by January 15th.
Okay. And after this, after we conclude this session, I'm going to send a follow-up email to everyone on the Zoom call with these dates, so you'll have that information on hand to know when you need to have everything submitted. If no one has any more questions for Keith, I think.
I got a question.
Okay.
Sorry. Hey, my question is there any talk about, I guess on the regulatory side, loosening up some of the restrictions that allow people to take more advantage of that? I mean, 1.2, I think what, less than 10% has been used so far?
So what about now? Honey, I got a grandchild.
Dorothy, yeah, all right, go ahead, Marvin.
Yeah, is there any talk about loosening up some of those restrictions that allow people to get greater access to these funds, these nonprofits? I had some partners that I'm working with. I encourage them to apply, and some of the people are going through the process and they've started by registering, but I guess some of their initial requests have been sent back, and I'm thinking about one group in specific. I'm thinking about one group particular in Humphreys County, where they weren't asking for much, but even then, like after they got sent back, it was already what was allowable was only like 50% of what they originally requested.
Yeah, Marvin, that's a good, I mean, it's a case by case. I know the regulations did do away with the 501c3 criteria, and you just have to be registered at the Secretary of State's office. That loosened it up as who's eligible, but why they were reduced and what was eligible. Initially, as I told you before, the regulations said electricity, utilities, rent, mortgage interest, and then that was changed on us about 2 months into the process. So maybe that's how they lost some opportunity. I can't tell you how many I've had to send back and say, sorry, that's no longer eligible. Let me help you on the income side. So Marvin, I mean, we don't cover Humphreys, but I'll be glad to, help in any way I can strategize with that nonprofit on ways to
I'm sorry.
maximize.
I work in a few different counties. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you just call me. I mean, stay in touch. I'll help strategize any way I can to help a nonprofit get the maximum
Yes,
that
sir.
they're eligible for. Because you're gonna hire my son, right? When he graduates from Mississippi State, right?
Yeah,
Mark?
man, tell him to come on down, man. A lot of work to do an extension.
He's got a month off from Mississippi State, and he's looking for something to do. If anybody has any type of, he does need pay, so sorry to, this is not quid pro quo at all, but he does need pay, a little bit of pay. He's an Eagle Scout, and he has food delivery experience.
I could find some people to feed him. If that's good enough, then we're in business. But if not, then I'm sorry.
Call me, Marvin, call me.
Okay. Well, I think that was some great information. Ms. Howes, I did get your message. I will contact you as soon as we conclude this call. But before we end, we do want to announce the door prize winner. And today it is Miss Josephine Rhymes. She is the winner of the $250 door prize today.
You are kidding.
No, I'm not.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to the Brenda Smith and the Maddox Foundation. They've been providing the door prizes for the past 3 Hunger Summits. And Ms. Rhymes, you are the latest winner. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for coming to this Hunger Summit, especially if you've been here from the beginning. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that because this was a great success, we want to try to stay in contact with everyone. We're using all the information that we have to see and to find out what ways we can help. And if something comes up or we have another Hunger Summit, you will know about it. So with nothing else to say, thank you everyone. I hope you all have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks,
To you
Terrence.
as well. Thank you.
Thank you.